God, we're gathered back here again today to continue digging into what you say about stuff that, truth be told, a lot of times we'd rather hide from, run away, than have to deal with. It's difficult when we have struggles with somebody that we care about, where somebody we thought we could trust lets us down. And the challenges of trying to address that and look at whether or not a relationship can be restored it's scary business. And it doesn't always work the way we want it to. And sometimes it takes so much more time than what we were hoping. So, Lord, we can't change all of the things that we don't have control over, but we can learn how to be as effective as we can be at following in your footsteps and doing what you've taught us to do. And I think the second thing, Lord, we can do is we can continue to learn how to pray better and more frequently to be able to let you work, Holy Spirit, on the hearts of those that we can't change, but you can through your influence. And so today, as we continue to learn, guide our minds and our hearts. Open us to what you would have to say to us today. Amen.
Amen. A bit of a roadmap for today. We promised you a video, first thing. Last thing, yesterday, we showed you a couple having an argument about how to spend vacation. And it was entitled, A Day in the Life. Our video we're going to show in just a moment is a different day in the life, to show how the same couple works on it in the right way. We're going to do the seminar, and then at the end of the seminar, we'll be giving you a report of those surveys that you turned in. Eric and I tabulated them last night. We found we got a lot of interesting information, and we got a lot of questions in our mind that we're wondering about. And I want to remind you that the homework assignments that we sent you, we want you to turn in after the meeting this morning. All right. Chuck, a question for everybody. That is, people have asked, will these seminars, are they being recorded so they can have them on a CD? Or a DVD, whichever. They are. And have you figured out whether or not you're going to be able to put the video clips in there? Yes. Okay, that's even better. All right, let's see a different day in the life of.
Hey there.
Hey.
So I'm trying to decide what to do for vacation this year.
Oh, yeah?
What do you think we should do?
Good question. I was actually thinking that this year we could go see my folks. We haven't seen them in a while. Well, what do you think?
I think we should go to the beach again this year. I want to relax. We had a good time last year. It's fun. If we go see your folks, your mom. Work's been hard this year. This has been just a tough year, and we go to your parents, I won't be able to relax. I want to go to the beach.
I know. Okay? I know it's been a rough year, especially because of work, and I know you need to relax, and if my mom's around, you can't always do that, but you know how sick my dad is. I mean, I really thought this would be the perfect opportunity for our whole family to go and spend some quality time with him while we can.
I know how important it is to see your dad. And I know we don't have much more time with him. All right, well, I wonder if we should do that. Okay, yeah. Yeah, let's do that.
Well, I don't want you to not get the break that you need. I mean, the beach was great for our whole family last year. I just wish you got longer than 2 weeks.
What if you take the kids and you go see your folks? You
But
take
the
them for a
whole
week.
point-
No, hold on. And then the last couple days I come up, and then after that we can take the kids to the beach for a week. I mean, it's kind of choppy, but I think it works.
Yeah, I think it sounds great.
Okay. You get to spend quality time with your dad. We get to take the kids to the beach and relax, and I only have to see your mom for a couple of days. As long as you're good for being away a few weeks, then it's good for everybody.
Yes, I think this sounds like the perfect solution. This is really important to me. I appreciate it. Hey, I'm gonna head up to bed. You coming?
Yeah, I guess so.
Different ending, wasn't it, than the argument they got into and the hard feelings and going to bed alone and all of that. So there are ways of doing things much more kindly and equitably than just tending to our own selfish desires. We're at a point on page 21 where we're changing the paradigm. Up until now in the seminar, we've been talking about how to deal with conflict from one or two standpoints. Either we are the offended party or we are the guilty party that's causing the offense. In the comments we've made and the counsel we've been given in Scripture has been related to one angle or the other. Now we're going to switch, and we're going to focus our attention for a little bit on what to do if we are drawn into a conflict situation as a third party, a conciliator. A conciliator is a umbrella term for a peacemaker, a mediator, could be an arbitrator in some cases, which is a little technically different, but it's a peacemaker. What do you do? Now, this might be as simple as resolving a dispute between siblings. It may be as common as solving a problem with your children, if you have small children. It may be an informal situation at work where a couple of work associates say, hey, we're having a hard time deciding what to do here. We're kind of at each other's throats on it. What do you suggest we do? So you can be a third-party peacemaker in a very informal way. You don't have to be a professional mediator like I am. You don't have to be an ordained minister like Eric in order to do it. It's something that any one of us can do and are asked to do at times, sometimes more than others. So what do conciliators do? Question?
Yes, I do have a question. I would love to learn this third-party thing because I'm not very good at that. But when it comes to someone trying to do me wrong, I don't look at it the same way. I look at it as, oh, Lord, thank you for letting me have an opportunity to show your love to this person that usually would, you usually would be in a fight or in a dislike, and it ends up just like warming my heart to be able to do it, and it seems like it warms their heart also.
See, that was your take-home for yesterday. To take home the idea that peacemaking is an opportunity. Conflict provides an opportunity for us.
God has allowed me to experience that for several years.
Good.
Yeah.
Very good.
But this mediator thing, I am really excited about.
Okay.
Good.
So, what do conciliators do? What do mediators do? Number one, they encourage self-control and courtesy. And that's not as complicated as you think. Just the presence of a third party will often cool the temperature of the environment a little bit. It's maybe a simple thing as when things get heated up and you know somebody's about ready to blow and lose their temper, you can say, hey, let's get a drink of water. How about a walk around the block or whatever, get some fresh air. It's just that simple at times. Sometimes you might have to be more direct and say, boy, things are getting kind of tense. You guys are really struggling here. Let's take a break and have prayer. So that's the role of a third-party peacemaker. Second point, you can ask questions and clarify facts. You can tell that party A is not listening to what party B is saying. And so you can go through it again and share from your perspective what you had heard party B saying, and party A can get the message. So you can ask questions to help them communicate with each other. And with Christian conciliation, you can give admonition from God's Word. There are principles that we can share. I was involved in a mediation where one man had defaulted on a very serious amount of money. And as we got together, he very quickly agreed that he would pay it. He owed the money and he would pay it. But as we got into the details about how he would pay it, he wanted it understood that he would pay it in cash without any records given. He didn't want a receipt, and he didn't want any record given that he had paid it. Now, here I am as a mediator. Would I feel comfortable in allowing my brethren to do that. Can you see the hazards involved here? Ken, I see you shaking your head. What's the danger of that kind of an arrangement?
Well, I guess the first thing is why wouldn't he want a record of it? It's a debt owed, and that's the best way to cancel it publicly.
So if he didn't have a receipt, the debtor could come at him again.
Exactly.
It's a risky thing for him.
So why would he want to even do that? It's no protection for himself.
Can anybody think of why he would want to do that? What do you think? Yeah, that's the left arm is the right arm in your case. We'll get. Oh, now he's suspicious. Let's repeat that again for the microphone.
Well, the thing is, if there's no record, then he can say, I'm done, and the debtor can say, well, no, it's not done yet.
So the risk involved in that kind of a situation
Both
is
ways.
you have no proof on either side, which is not good. You need something substantive. Does anybody think about IRS implications? Okay. Uncle Government may want to have an interest, in this amount of money being shifted hands. So I had to speak up. It wasn't just a ethical issue. There was legal implications, and I couldn't go along with it. I had to give them some counsel and admonition. We can expand resources. Sometimes as a third party, you may see that some organization might be able to help that they hadn't thought of. I was visiting with a family in a church situation, and I couldn't stay any longer. My time was over, and they had a serious problem. I suggested that they consult a Christian conciliation group. And I reached on the shelf behind me. I had seen a phone book there. You remember those things we used to call phone books? And I opened it up, and here was a section on conciliation, okay, and mediation, not meditation. That's in the section just above, but mediation. There were two organizations nearby their ranch, and within an hour's drive, where they could go and get help like I would have been able to give had that time. So you can expand the resources. And then if you're not able to achieve success in helping them resolve their issues, you as a third party may be able to have an input in point E about getting a third party involved, like the church organization if it's the church, or how to approach the owner of the company if it's a business situation. Help them process how they are going to find reconciliation if they're not finding it with your help. Any questions before we move on to the subject of church discipline? Yes, brother.
Hey, you said something about one of the parties not hearing what you're saying. I've been involved several times when the people just don't hear what you're saying. It's like talking to a couch and trying to make it a Buick. It's just not going to happen.
Right.
And it shuts me down. I don't know what to. I just tell them, listen, you're not able to hear this right now, or something.
Well, there's a very, very interesting, simple thing that a third-party conciliator can do if you sense that that's going on. You can say, Party A's made a statement, Party B's not hearing. You can say to Party B, I'm curious, would you parrot back to me, repeat what you just heard Party A say? And you'll find out if they've heard them or not. But it is true, sometimes they're thinking so much about what they want to convey, they're not listening. They're tuning them out. And as a third party, you can help either one. I've often said that if I'm doing my job as a mediator, either party may think I'm taking the other person's side at one point in time or another, and they think I'm not being neutral. But what I'm really doing is trying to help them communicate. And if I'm doing it effectively, it'll help both of them.
I sometimes, mostly for myself, but I will share it with people that I'm doing some conciliation with. The idea that really much of my job in this role is to serve as, in kind of a science fiction or Star Trek analogy, a universal translator. We're speaking two different languages, and that's probably why you're here. You haven't been able to work this out yourselves. You're needing somebody else to help you understand what the other person is saying.
That's right.
And so finding those ways to help that person say what they really, if they were operating out of their Christ-centered heart, would want to say and do, but their self is getting in the way, you're there to help the Jesus come out in them a little bit, if you will. And it's a really powerful thing to watch when you can see that connect. But I understand what you're saying. It is incredibly stressful at times when you can tell that these two people just they're from different planets. They're not even thinking the same way.
That's right. So we're going to talk about church discipline just very briefly, unless you have more questions. I want to make these comments about it. When we made up our Adventist version of this Peacemaker seminar, and I presented it to Ken Sandy of Peacemaker Ministries, he said, Charlie, your church has a wonderful plan, a very biblical, good plan of how to deal with discipline within the church. And then he asked an embarrassing question. He said, do your churches follow it? And I had to confess that sometimes, and when they do, it works well. And then there are times when they don't follow it well. My gut feeling, no, my experience has said that a church either doesn't try to use the church discipline provisions in our manual at all, or if they do it very harshly and punitively, and it's very hurtful to the people involved and ultimately to the church as well. So I think I have not seen good church discipline process used very often. It tends to be either too lenient or missing or too severe. Do you have questions about how to use church discipline here as it might apply? Comment?
One of the problems with using the following the model is that it doesn't always allow us to accomplish our own objectives. Like, in other words, that following the model doesn't always support my side, if you understand what I'm saying.
I see.
That does tend to be an inconvenience.
So if you think the church is not going to support your side, you're not anxious for the church to get involved in solving it. Is that the point? All right, that could be a problem, a serious problem, all right. And what we need to remember is that the church ought not to be taking sides with individuals. We need to be neutral to the parties involved. However, the church cannot always be neutral to the issues involved. If there are theological, moral issues, or other legal issues or whatever, sometimes the church has to take a stand, and by taking a stand on right, they might be in opposition to... yes.
Yeah, when someone asked that question, it made me wonder how you would handle it when you saw that they weren't using the right type of model. How would you go about trying to encourage that?
That's a very difficult question, because really in our organization, the local church has supreme authority in its activities. The manual is there to give counsel and guidance, but it's not law. The church denomination has no way to enforce the church manual. If a church gets too rogue in its activities, the only thing the conference can do is disband the church and reorganize at a later date or something. But our organization is set up so that we give scriptural counsel, and we expect our pastors and our leaders to follow the counsel. And when they don't, the church suffers. We'll get this comment, and then we'll give you a chance again.
That's right where I want to speak.
Okay.
When my first marriage disintegrated, I went to the pastor, set up a thing to save the marriage. And the pastor didn't have a clue of what to say or do. And his wife came along, and she finished burying it.
Oh, dear.
Yes, the subject of divorce and church discipline is an extremely difficult subject for the church to handle. And one of the obvious reasons is that the church has no way of knowing what goes on behind closed doors. All we have is the testimony from either party, and of course that's a biased testimony, and it really puts the church in a difficult spot. Comment?
I was just wondering if you might happen to know a way of, well, of course, praying about it and then trying to touch some sort of emotional part of someone that's wanting to go rogue, so it might make them, at least after prayer, might help to soften them in some particular way.
Well, we're going to get into this, how to approach somebody in a situation where other people are involved as a third party, so we're going to talk about that next. So let's see if we can move onward. Did I see one more hand we want to recognize? Maybe not. Okay.
Dad,
So,
I wanted to add one thing here if I could.
sure.
One of the things I've observed in myself and I'm not sure whether it's more prevalent in our particular neck of the country, in the Northwest, but sometimes I think our Americanism gets ahead of our Christianity, or our Adventism, if you want to use an ism. We have a very clear sense of our individuality in our Northwest American culture. I have the right to choose what I'm going to do, when I want to do it, where I want to do it, and how I want to do it.
Yes.
I live in the county, up in Kootenai County, and we have acreage. I have a neighbor who built a beautiful home. He happens to have a helicopter. I don't have a helicopter. He's in a different set of economic circumstances, but we're blessed to live close by. And he built a motorcycle track for his kids. And soon the neighbors started coming around, one neighbor in particular organizing the rest of us, saying he's making too much noise, and trying to claim that he was infringing upon this person's right to sleep during the day. And initially, the county commissioners actually took all of the things that he was saying, that he was organizing races, and that he had a whole thing he was planning on doing there, and they initially restrained his right to do what he wanted on his property until he talked to them privately and said, look, what you just were told is absolutely untrue, and if you persist in this, I'm going to avail myself of the legal system. And they immediately reversed their decision. All of that is to illustrate that we have this strong sense of, look, you can't tell me what I can do and what I can't do. And in terms of our legal system and our Americanism, within the bounds of what the law has said, that's absolutely true. We value our freedom. But when we choose to be a follower of Jesus Christ, we accept a community that inherently has the right to speak into our lives. We desire that as long as they're telling us things we want to hear. But when they start telling us things that we don't want to hear, our Americanism flares up. And we say, you don't have the right to tell me what to do. And we start to react against that out of fear, pride, and selfishness. And I know what I'm saying. I'm not trying to accuse anybody here. This is me I'm talking about here. When people start to get messing in my business, I want to tell them where to jump off. But when I've chosen to follow Jesus Christ, I've committed to this community, and I have invited you to speak hopefully graciously and with the Spirit leading you and relationship, desiring to deepen that relationship. You have the permission to speak into my life. And we forget that sometimes when we're trying to defend ourselves and against what we want to do or what we feel you're going to try to prevent us from.
Very good point, and it's probably a good segue to talk about when and how a person ought to be involved in the civil court system. So let's move on to that if we can.
Okay.
We've already read the passage in 1 Corinthians 6 which says not to go to court, but it also says the church has a responsibility. Can you think of some times when it would be appropriate for a Christian to involve the civil court system? Can you mention any of them by name? Pardon? When there's violence. Let's broaden it. When there's illegal activity. When there's illegal activity, you may have to use the strong arm of the law and such things as domestic violence and whatever. Child abuse. Just to get a divorce, you have to engage the court system. It has to be ratified by the courts. Now, the terms of the divorce can be mediated. I've done that on numerous occasions. I hate it with a passion because it feels like I have to go bathe in Lysol after I hear all of the bad things. But the terms can be mediated and then ratified, legalized in the court system. So courts would be one thing. Any other reasons why we might have to use the court system? So let's look at the questions on the bottom of page 22 that we should ask if we're considering using litigation. Am I sure I cannot overlook this offense? Proverbs 19 says it's a glory to a man to overlook offense. Have I sincerely tried to work this out directly by talking to the offending party? We need to really give it the best efforts. Have I tried to have others help resolve this situation? It's amazing how much can be done through mediation and arbitration before it ever goes to litigation. I'll give a story or two perhaps before we conclude on that. Have I tried to help the church help us resolve this dispute? Have I been willing to use the discipline process if it is applicable to this dispute? An attorney friend of mine said, Charlie, tell the church members that if they're willing to invest every spare moment of their lives for the next 2 years and all of their expendable income plus some that they would consider not expendable, then go ahead and consider a lawsuit because that's what it's going to take. And he said they're not going to be happy with the results. He said, I don't know when I've ever had a client that's totally happy with the results of litigation. Everybody loses. Somebody said except the lawyers. And he might even agree on that point. So, yes. Look at the top of page 23. Look at the negative aspects of litigation. We'll throw these on the screen for you. It's a bad witness for Christians to get into court, duking it out with each other. What must the world be thinking if they know that these are Christians, and especially if it's a dispute that should have been settled with the church? Sometimes the law will refuse to get involved if a church situation because of the implications of religious liberty. Number two, it ignores the root problems. Courts are not set up to make reconciliation. They're set up to make decisions on a legal basis. And therefore, there is generally no reconciliation between the parties involved. I was in my advanced training for mediation and arbitration when I noticed that most of the class were lawyers. And I began to feel very insecure as a pastor, a preacher, here with a bunch of legal minds talking about mediation and arbitration. So on a private note, during a break, I said to one of them, I said, why are you guys here? You learn to do mediation and arbitration in law school, surely, so why the interest in this program? He said, I'll tell you why. He said, I had a client that had a business dispute with his partner. They had a successful business that had gone south, and they were needing to go to court to settle the breakup of their business. And they had been friends. They had been members of the same church, both elders in the church. They owned vacation property together. Their families vacationed together, and now it was all going out the window. Then he said, my client came to me and said, I want to try once more to solve this problem with Ralph, and I have engaged the services of a Christian mediator to come and try to help us out. He said, Charlie, I laughed at him. I laughed in his face. And I said, forget it. You've tried everything for 2 years. You spent a lot of money. Court's right around the corner. You're just wasting more time and money. And he said, I don't care. I'm going to do it anyway because I feel like I need to. So I need you there to be my legal counsel if I have questions. And will you come? Well, I said, sure, I'll be there. So he went. The mediator sat them down. He had never met them. He gathered all of his information from other proper sources from them and others. And they said, let's have a devotional and prayer. And after prayer, he turned to my client and he said, tell me, during this 2 years when all this has been going on, have you ever said anything, done anything toward your partner that you regret, that you feel like wasn't the right thing to do? And after a moment, my client said, mm-hmm. He said, don't you think this would be a good time to apologize and tell him? So he did. Then he turned to the other man, asked the same question. So after they got their apologies out of the way, he said, now let's get to work. How are we going to dissolve this company? And my client surprised me by saying, I'm not so sure I want to. I didn't know he felt bad about the way he treated me. And I'm glad I could apologize. Anyway, what had happened is that mediator helped to deal with the heart issues that were between them. And once they got the heart issues taken care of, they didn't want to separate the business. He said, let's draw up some kind of agreement about how we can keep this from happening again in the future. And the lawyer said, that's why I'm here, because they don't teach us reconciliation in law school. That's a good illustration of it. All right, going on down on page 23. Occasions that's going to be appropriate for us. There are situations that religious liberty is involved. We talked about some of them. Some could be Sabbath work issues that might have to go to court. And if it will have a righteous purpose, will it glorify God, is the next fill in the blank. Will it benefit somebody else following after us? Well, maybe will it protect our children of the weaker parties? And is it necessary to preserve those rights that we have come to expect under God and under law? So, in this seminar, we're not saying you should never use the court system. You should never go to law. Sometimes you're going to need to. Sometimes it's the right thing to do. And you have to decide if your situation is the right thing. So let's switch over to the sweet part of the seminar. Let's talk about forgiveness. Eric, lead us.
Sounds good. First of all, what time is it here? I want you to just stand up for a second. And turn around and smile with your eyes or your mouth at somebody, or both. Oh, yes. Stretch it out. And then turn back around and have a seat. I'm going to show a video to get us started in this topic for a moment. I'm going to go ahead and ask the team to pull up the Forgive video and let this get us into a pretty powerful section.
So you see, Andrew, I realized after rethinking the whole thing and after talking to Jim that I really came across too strong in that meeting yesterday.
No, it's okay. I mean, it happens all the time. We all get a little...
Really, let me finish. I mean, I really came across too strong. I was out of control. And I can see how I really embarrassed you. Would you forgive me?
It's no problem, you know? I mean, I didn't think anything about it.
Well, it's important to me that you know I was wrong. And that I realize I was wrong.
Yeah, sure, I forgive you, all right? I mean, like I said, it's no problem.
Okay, great. Thanks. Okay. See you around, eh?
Yeah, sure thing. And then he...
Now we're never going to know what happened.
There's a couple of breaks in this, so you can expect that, brother.
Comes in the next morning and he wants to be all buddy-buddy, you know? Guess it's easy to do that when you're the winner. And Rick's marketing scheme, let me tell you, I guarantee it's going to cost thousands more than it's going to bring in. It's so top-heavy with advertising costs and schemes. God, what an idiot.
Come on, Andy, he said he was sorry. He's just being passionate. I thought that's what you liked best about working with Rick. Besides, soon enough, everyone will see that your idea was the best for the project.
I keep thinking about how you got in my face, you know? And every time I think about it, I wish I could have done one of those Jimmy Cagney routines, you know, with the grapefruit.
Guess it's a good thing it wasn't a breakfast meeting.
Whatever. Well, look, I gotta go. I gotta go bow down to the king of marketing.
Will you stop? You like Rick. You two be friends. You hear me?
Whatever. Gotta go.
Hey, Andrew.
Hey, Rick. How you doing?
Great. Hey, listen, I was going over the schedule for the new marketing campaign. I noticed you still haven't got a web designer for the new web page.
Yeah, I got a couple of calls out, but these guys are really busy. I mean, everybody's going to the web.
Yeah.
Who I'm talking to. The website's a big part of your marketing plan.
Oh, yeah, and if we don't get it done in time to introduce the winter line,
Well,
you know.
Then, what, you gonna pitch another fit like the one you threw in the conference room last month, huh? You gonna maybe throw some things this time?
I said I was sorry about that, you know. I thought you'd forgiven
Come
me.
on, lighten up, all right? It was just a joke. I'll have a web designer in your office in the morning, and you can sell us both at the same time.
Great. Well, listen, see you in the morning then, okay? All right.
What a jerk.
Good morning to you, too.
I was talking about Rick. He's so difficult to work with lately, you know? It's like he walks around here like he owns the place.
I guess I hadn't noticed. He looks preoccupied to me. Hey, are you going golfing this weekend?
You heard about the big blow-up we had a couple of weeks ago, huh?
Yeah, I heard it got a little tense.
Little tense? The guy went berserk, screaming and yelling. It's one thing to work at a place, but to have to come in and take abuse from a coworker. One of us has got to go. And I tell you what, it's not going to be me.
Hey, you guys are always like two peas in a pod. You'll calm down and things will be back to normal in no time. Just give it some time.
I'm giving his marketing plan all the time in the world. Just you wait and see.
Hey, Andy, look, if you can't hurry that guy along, then maybe we need to hire another firm. The deadline for the advertising ad for the September-October issues are right around the corner. Hey, I don't want to be stuck with the same old this year for our print advertising. You know, I really want to be innovative.
Okay, Rick, I'll give the guy another call. Or better yet, I'll have him call you, and then you can do the same dance that I've been doing with him for 2 weeks.
Okay.
Look, I'm pretty busy here, okay?
Hey, listen, I thought we'd have lunch together. You know, it's been a while since we had lunch. How about macaroni grill?
No, man, I mean, I've really got to stay here. I got a lot of stuff to do.
Andy, it seems like things haven't been the same between us. I mean, ever since I blew up in the conference room.
No, I've forgotten all about that.
I mean, I don't know. Things seem different. I mean, work just hadn't been the same.
Rick, it's just that, I mean, we're all busy, We're trying to get this marketing and promotional campaign of yours kicked off, and we're just all really busy.
Well, you sure you've forgiven me and everything? I mean, you're okay. We're on the up and up here, right?
Rick, like I said before, it's no problem.
Okay. Lunch another time, huh?
Sure.
And that is the end of it this time.
Whew. What would you say how was going on in the heart of the guy who was wronged there? How was he feeling? Hurt, jealous, anger, bitter, unforgiving. Now, we didn't see what happened. We only hear the description. But if it is as bad as the person who experienced it felt like it was, do you think some of those feelings were natural? Yeah? If somebody treated you that way, it's quite natural to feel that fear, that anger, resentment. That's what we do all on our own. You don't have to work at that, do you? And yet, we have Ephesians chapter 4. It says, be kind and compassionate to one another, forgiving each other. And then it adds a little bit of a lever to the end of it. Just as what? Wow. If it had said, forgive those who deserve it. I could get on board with that. If it said, forgive those when you feel like they've paid enough of a price. They've made restitution. Forgive those when that you like and you want to maintain a relationship with. But it said, forgive those just as Christ forgave you.
Father, forgive them, for they know not what they do.
Yeah, he did say that, didn't he? And it was a pretty unforgivable situation, at least by human standards. Yeah.
Yeah, I think a lot of the confusion sometimes is that. Yeah, I think a lot of the confusion sometimes is that we don't understand how Christ forgave us.
Uh-huh.
Like there's confusion there too, right?
Yeah, that's an excellent point, Dale. I appreciate you saying that. Largely because it's difficult and uncomfortable for us to at least account for some of the reality of our standing between us and God, right? Without Christ's forgiveness and His grace, the distance between us and Him, the nature of what sin did. As we talk here, one of the things we're going to work through a little bit is the actual impact of what we mean when we say sin. I won't use the illustration here because it turned out to be a little more dramatic than what I had intended. But one time I was preaching on the subject, and I wanted to illustrate the nature of the fundamental nature of what sin does to humanity and its relationship with God. And I had a lamp sitting on a table in front of the audience, and I had it turned on, and it was shining light. And I took a pair of what we call dikes, cutters, and I cut the cord, because that's what sin does between us and God. Well, yeah, you know what happened, right? The light went out, but there was a pretty large... it was insulated. I didn't get hurt in any way, but it made a pretty good pop. And the light didn't shine anymore. Sin severs our connection to the life giver. We are fundamentally distanced from everything we need in order to actually function as true human beings. So that's what sin really does. It's not just the things I'm doing and what I do to harm one another and against God. It is fundamentally severing my identity and connection to the divine. And so when Christ comes along and says, I forgive you, and then he also reconciles us to God, he reconnects that cord. That's something I can't do, but he can. Yes?
Not all things that are done to you from someone isn't necessarily sin.
Uh-huh.
An example of that, one time when I had, who I thought was my good friend at the time, started feeding all kinds of silly ideas into people's head to where I had the whole church attacking me.
Mm.
And years later, I got to meet this man again, and he says, George, I need to talk to you. And so we went somewhere. I said, yeah, what? And he says, years ago when I did what I did, he says, I really feel guilty. Will you ever forgive me? And this is how I had to answer him. We have to learn patience. And I'll just make up, your name's Eric, I'll call him Eric.
Fair enough.
I says, Eric, I forgave you when you did it because I haven't got time for this foolishness. But it takes patience, and that took years.
Thank you for sharing that story,
Yes.
because it illustrates what we're going to talk about here very, very well. Why do we forgive? Ellen White says in Gospel Workers, deal with your brethren as you wish God would deal with you. If we expect our prayers for forgiveness to be heard, we have to offer them in a forgiving spirit. We must forgive others in the same manner and the same extent that we ourselves hope to be forgiven. Oh, wow. That's a lot. Because I would like to be forgiven for the foolishness that I commit from time to time. I'll get to you in just a second. Think about this. How much have you been forgiven? I've been forgiven everything. A whole lot. And if that's true for me, then I ought to be one of the most forgiving people on the planet, right?
That's right.
Forgiveness is, let's be clear, forgiveness is not how I feel about somebody. It's not a feeling. It's not forgetting what they did, nor is it excusing it as though it didn't matter. And so we've taken feelings and we've taken forgetting and taken excusing off the table. It really narrows down what we're talking about when we talk about biblical forgiveness. It is a decision. It's a choice to act. In fact, it's 4 commitments we're going to talk about in a moment. It is a choice to relate to somebody in a particular way, regardless of what they've done, regardless of how I feel about them. It's a choice. It is a choice to reverse the fundamental problem we're all in, that personal separation, that damage to relationship that says this is going to separate you from me and make it impossible for us to maintain a relationship. Your iniquities have separated you from God, Isaiah says. Your sins have hidden his face from you.
Eric, there's an illustration that I think most all of us in this room can relate to. Compare the idea of forgiveness to the concept of love. We often say love is a feeling, and there are feelings involved in love, wonderful feelings, but it's basically a decision. There are times when I don't feel like loving my wife because of something she said or did, but I choose to love her anyway because I made that choice when I married her. And it's amazing how the feelings will come when you make the right decision. So forgiveness is the same way. If we waited until we felt like forgiving, we probably never would.
Well, I can say that for sure, yes.
When you have forgiven somebody, Does that mean you can't ask questions as to why that took place?
Thank you for asking that question. We're just walking into that, so you've just set us up very nicely there. Let's talk about the 4 commitments, the promises that we make when I'm forgiving, and then we'll be able to answer a couple of these. The first promise you're making when you say, I forgive you, is that you will say, I will not dwell upon the incident. You noticed in the video how at home he's chewing this up and he's rethinking it, and he's coming back and he's thinking about what that person must have been thinking and doing. It's a choice to use the mental discipline of saying, when I am doing this, I'm going to recognize where my mind is going, and I am going to think on whatever is pure, whatever is noble. We talked about that yesterday. I'm going to choose to redirect my thoughts. Number 2.
It definitely doesn't mean you'll never think about it again.
Right.
Because the devil will make sure it comes back to mind.
I've found that he's quite good at that.
Yes, he is. But you don't have to dwell on it.
I promise I will not bring this incident up again or use it against you. We saw both of those things being illustrated in the video, right? He was figuring out, how am I going to slow walk this to make you look bad? I'm going to use this against you. You treated me badly. I'm now going to make you look bad in response. I'm going to bring this up to other people. I'm going to bring it up to you and just remind you what you did to me, even though I said I forgive you. Number 3, I promise I'm not going to talk to others about the incident. Well, we know he didn't do that. I promise, number 4, that I will not allow this incident to stand between us or hinder our personal relationship. I want to be very, very transparent here. That is the kind of choice that takes God working through you to fulfill. Because when you've been harmed and hurt by somebody, it is very, very difficult to begin to act toward them as though that had not been done to you. Oh, did somebody forget to push the button?
I did, thank you.
Uh-huh.
That's why I'm supposed to be doing it instead of him, because we tend to forget when we're speaking, and I forgot when I wasn't speaking.
I forgive you.
Thank you, I'm glad you believe in forgiveness.
I'll let you keep the button.
Yes.
Those promises are something that we ought to take very, very seriously. Let me tell you something about my basic makeup. I figured out early on in my life that one of the easy ways to stop a conversation that was getting into uncomfortable territory was to take responsibility for something by saying, I'm sorry, whether I felt like it or not. And we never got to the forgiveness part because I just apologized whether it was my fault or not. And that worked really, really well up through the first couple years of our marriage until my wife called me for working both sides of the relationship. You want to take away my ability to find out who you really are, because you apologize and you run away from the fight before we've ever gotten to a point of me talking about what's really going on and you really honestly hearing. What was happening was I was apologizing before I ever got to the point of her telling me what I'd really done to hurt her. And so then she never had the opportunity to be heard and for me to forgive, or for her to ask for that forgiveness and me to offer my repentance. And so I was keeping the relationship at a very shallow level. This takes us to a place where we will become more closely connected if we follow it. And that scares some people. It scared me. My wife can be a scary person. She knows that. She also knows that she's one of the most incredible people in the world. And the problem really wasn't with her. It was with me. Is what I was afraid might happen if I went to that place emotionally with her. And there have been some good help along the way that helped us go through that to where both of us can seek one another's forgiveness now. and offer that forgiveness. And that is a sweet, sweet thing when we can do that for one another and make those commitments. Some of you seem to be earnestly seeking for forgiveness of sins, for freedom in God. Do you deserve the pardon that you're seeking? Oh, I'm glad you said that. No, you don't. Nevertheless, God's willing to grant it freely. And dare you withhold that from your brethren, that forgiveness and affection of which you do not think them worthy? Would you have God deal thus with us? So if you're the offended party, there are ways to offer forgiveness. Now, I want to ask you a question in a moment. I'm getting ahead of myself here. But what if you're the offending party? How do you get forgiveness from the person that you need the forgiveness from? That's a tough one. But there are some things you can do that can honor your side of the street. You can do this much. Their choice to forgive or not forgive you is something that they have to make for themselves, but you can do this. When in Scripture we see people responding effectively to sin that they have committed, there are several things that happen. There's repentance that takes place, which means I'm recognizing what I did moved in the wrong direction, away from God's desire. I'm going to change direction. That's what repentance means. There's confession. I'm admitting that, not just to you, but to all those, remember we talked about, include all that are affected by the issue. I'm confessing. There is some type of restitution. Now, that can get complicated if this isn't a matter that can have a physical. If I broke your bike, I can replace the bike, right? But what if I broke your heart? How do you restore somebody's emotional pain? Yeah.
He says this is the last time I get to talk. If you noticed yesterday, I never did talk.
He's been storing it up.
Yeah. Forgiving is also forgetting. And that one comment you made, if you was in the wrong, sometimes you don't even know if you're in the wrong or not. You have no clue. And the reason I say that is I had a 25-year marriage that I was working at saving. I went to a psychologist, people that understand your brain, I guess, and he started asking me all these goofy questions. And at the time, I thought, he's a jerk. I mean, I tell the truth on everything, whether it's bad or good. I thought, this guy is a jerk. But he started asking me these questions. He's never met my wife or nothing. And all of a sudden, he started talking. And I looked at this man. I said, well, when did you meet my wife? He says, I've never met her. He says, I'm telling you now about her because I've studied this stuff and I understand it. And the bottom line was, he says, you tell me some things that she did that made you mad. And I'm saying, that should be easy enough. 25-year marriage, that should be pretty easy, kind of what you were saying there. And I sat there and I thought. I can't put my finger on any of them. But there was a lot of times. He says, now here's the difference. Your wife put hers all in a bag and she didn't forget about them and the bag is overflowing. Mm-hmm. Right away I knew this marriage is probably gone. Of course I've made her mad. What guy hasn't made his wife mad after 25 years? It has to be a forgiveness both ways and a forgetting.
Well, we're going to talk about that in just a moment. I'm maybe going to challenge you just a little bit on that one. This idea of forgetting and forgiveness. But thank you for the story. Restitution, particularly when it comes to emotional things, may be related to then the next thing that happens, transformation or change. When we are saying, I'm repenting and I'm confessing and I'm making restitution, that time of change starts to restore what was lost. When trust is what's been lost, time is needed in order to restore it. So I'm now acting in a different way. Yes? We're in the middle of page 25. Yep. Good. Right in the middle of the page, there is repentance, confession. There's a blank line that says that you can write in restitution on. Then the next line says change, and then there's a blank line, and that is forgiveness. That may be forgiveness. That's where the forgiveness part from that other person may come in for you ultimately. And then reconciliation is what happens afterwards. Now, if we're an offended party, let me ask you this question. When do you think we should extend forgiveness to somebody who has never confessed or asked for forgiveness? When should that happen if you're the one that's been wronged and the other person hasn't confessed? Over here.
Forgiveness is not for the person you're forgiving, it's for yourself.
Okay. So forgiveness is not really completely dependent upon the other person. It's really about what's going on inside of us. So when should we offer forgiveness to somebody who's wronged us? I'm hearing always down here. Immediately. Yes. Okay. There's a process that you have to go through to get to that point for yourself, whether they're saying, you're absolutely right. There is a process, isn't there? So it may not end immediately, but it certainly can begin as soon as you're ready to start that process for yourself. Yes?
I know everybody's different, but when the Lord pointed out to me that since He has told us to forgive or we can't be forgiven, I knew that I had to do it for Him because it's a commandment and for me. And so that kind of took the process out for me because I'm like, okay, I'm obeying what He said. So it just kind of, and I don't know if everybody can do that or not. But
I appreciate you recognizing there's differences in different people's emotional processing because some can and some there's an ongoing recommitment to those four choices daily for a while, right? Because I'm not feeling this way. And I've got to say, okay, how am I going to do that today? Yes.
Yeah. I don't know about everybody, but it takes a while for me to forgive. I can't do it immediately. I got to struggle with it for a while and chew it around, and then finally, okay. I give
And
up.
isn't it typically the more severe the offense, the longer it may take us to come to that point? If it's a slight of thing, a harsh word or something, we can forgive very easily. But if it's a threat on our marriage or some other significant thing, it takes a while for us to process it and realize our God-given responsibility to forgive.
Yeah, I have found if you hang on to it, the longer you hang on to it, the more difficult it becomes.
Good point.
To give it up.
Dad's going to talk about unforgiveness and some of the consequences and the impact in just a moment. You're right. It's deadly because of what it's doing inside us. But before we get there, we need to talk about one other thing, and that's this idea about consequences. And it's part of what tangles up forgiveness for us. And it comes a little bit into that context of forgetting. There are things that people do to us that have long-term consequences, right? Sometimes. We have gone through experiences or we have known people who've experienced things that no matter what you do, the impact of that action is going to continue for a long time to come. Can you forgive and still allow that there might be consequences that will have to be dealt with?
Eric, before we answer that question, I want to tell you a story that I don't think you've ever heard. You and I have a friend by the name of Jim Boyd at Walla Walla University. He has his PhD in social work now. And years ago, Jim sent me an article written by another PhD in social work. And I don't remember the exact title, but the gist was Why We Should Never Forgive.
Oh, my.
Yeah.
That'll catch your attention.
I read it with interest, you can be sure. And when I got finished, I thought, if I thought forgiveness was what that author is saying it is, I wouldn't think we should forgive either, because the author was propounding that if we forgive, then we are going to forget it. We're going to put it aside and never think of it again. We're going to excuse that vile act. And she used as her case study and support the offense, an offense against a child, and why we should never forgive the offending party. But she did not understand what forgiveness was. That made all the difference in the world. So let's talk about consequences then.
Yeah, and that's where this connects to that idea of forgiveness. There are things that I think we can mean when we say forgiveness. Remember, it says forgiveness is a choice not to continue to bring this incident up or to continue to dwell on this incident. In that way, that's a healthy type of setting. I'm not going to keep this thing there. But the idea of forgetting sometimes includes saying, I'm going to imagine that it never even happened. And what that can do is it robs us of working through to the other side of something that is a trauma, and it did impact us. And there may be very real consequences, and for those that have experienced those consequences, it can look like, particularly, let's do the rough, this is the difficult analogy. Let's say that there has been a situation where somebody has violated boundaries and harmed a child and sexually or physically abused them. And now they're coming back and they're expecting, saying, well, the church is supposed to forgive. By that they mean, I should not be held accountable for the damage I've done to somebody else. Let me just ask you the question. If we forget, then, in our forgiving, what have we said to the child who was harmed by those actions? We have said, yeah, what they did was okay. It doesn't matter. And so we have now also committed an offense against the victim. So we have to be very thoughtful when we say we're going to forget, that we're not saying we're going to eliminate consequences. We're simply saying, I am not going to, every time I look at you, remind you of how horrible a person you are. I'm going to treat you in a way that, with the consequences understood, is moving forward into the grace of Christ. Yes?
There was an interesting article years ago in Wall Street Journal that illustrates that very well. The title of the article was The Sin of Forgiveness.
The Sin of Forgiveness.
The Sin of Forgiveness.
Interesting title.
And the context was right after Timothy McVeigh had bombed the Oklahoma City Federal Building and killed a number of people. The author was responding to many Christians who hit the pavement with posters and signs saying, Timothy, we forgive you. And maybe at the time it was, at least the author apparently was seeing something about, never mind the consequences, we forgive you.
Good illustration of it.
And he was appealing that there have to be consequences.
Thanks for the sermon title. I'm going to use that someday. Let me ask you this question. Can you think of any biblical examples of where God forgave, but he did not forget? And there were consequences to the sinner even after God forgave. Let's name a few.
David and Bathsheba.
David and Bathsheba. And?
On the David and Bathsheba incident, you notice that David's the child that came about after that died.
Yes.
And God said, listen, it's because you've given the opportunity for people to blaspheme God's name over them. So it wasn't just this issue between David and Bathsheba, but people were blaspheming God, and they still blaspheme God today over that incident.
Good point.
Oh my.
So God could not just act like it was nothing. So forgiving to David, but he still had to do something because of the blasphemation that came after that.
Moses' life gives us a number of examples where in his rashness Moses sinned, but God forgave him, and yet Moses couldn't go into the promised land because of that.
And when David numbered the people, also a bunch of the people ended up having to die because he was how many people that we were supposed to that was the
So,
number one.
if I may, I'm going to wrap up this situation with this quick story because we're running out of time.
All right.
And we got some time to cover. There was a church in British Columbia that I worked with where one of the members was alleged, convicted, and spent time for sexually abusing a child or children. Served time, came back to the same small community, same Adventist church. And at the next nominating committee period, the family of the good brother wanted to make him the leader of the primary department. And I can tell by your reaction, some of you would not think that would be a good idea.
That is heartening to hear.
Yes, indeed. But it was so dividing to the congregation. First of all, he maintained his innocence. He maintained he had never offended, and yet he was found guilty, and he did serve time. So when I sat down with the church to try to sort this out, I reaffirmed the church's decision. This was the right thing to do. You cannot ask a convicted felon to serve in this capacity. And the response was very graphic. Why not, Charlie Brown? God has forgiven him. Why can't you? Has nothing to do with forgiveness. You're right, sister. That's the right answer. It has to do everything with the consequences of sin. If your church treasurer absconds with $100,000 and later repents, and even if repays the $100,000, give her the benefit of the doubt or him the benefit of the doubt, you're not likely to reelect that person as treasurer next time around. There are consequences, and it isn't a matter of forgiveness. It's a matter of protecting other people around, et cetera, et cetera. Well, we must move on. We must move on. This has been good stuff, hasn't it? This is where the rubber meets the road. But we do have some other good things to cover. What about when you cannot forgive? How do you overcome an unforgiving spirit? That's reality. It's not easy to forgive. And the more serious the offense, the more difficult it's likely to be to forgive. So if you give me a chance, we'll come back to questions in a moment. Notice the quote on the bottom of page 23. Unforgiveness is the poison we drink, hoping the other person will die. That's very graphic. It says it all. And someone said earlier, I think over here, we are the ones that suffer from an unforgiving spirit. We are the ones that eat our heart out. We were coming back from the seminary after 2 years there, and we were approaching the night. Well, it was a little earlier than that, and I thought of my family member that lived in the area, and that we might be able to get a free room for the night, and they could meet my wife, whom they'd never met. So I called ahead, told them we were on our way through, could we stop and visit? I didn't invite ourselves overnight. I thought maybe that would come as a natural gift. But I was shocked to hear that I was not welcome in their home. Why? Because of an offense that they had against my father years before. I didn't even know about it. And here this family member had held a grudge against my dad, and it was extended to me because I was his son. They had been harboring that offense for so long, and just to look at their lives, you could tell how it had affected them. Their health was not good, et cetera, et cetera. I'm glad that that was reconciled eventually, but it was a graphic example of what happens when we harbor a grudge. Turn to page 26. Your body does make bad chemicals. Okay, what can we do to renounce sinful attitudes and unrealistic expectations in this business of not forgiving? Number one, we ought not to be expecting the offender to earn or deserve our forgiveness. What would it be if God expected us to do that, to earn our forgiveness? Doesn't work. We really need to resist the desire to punish the offender. That's what we saw in the video clip. He was attacking his marketing scheme. He was going to get even by ambushing his marketing scheme. And we certainly can't demand a guarantee that they'll never offend again. We would be in bad shape if we said, God, will you forgive me? And he says, okay, I'll forgive you if you never do it again. So these are things we need to remember. Forgiveness is a costly activity. When we were sharing this in one seminar, that we need to forgive before the offending party even apologized, one brother shouted out, can you prove that from Scripture? And I simply said, Father, forgive them. They do not know what they are doing. What more would we need than Jesus' forgiveness of those who nailed him to the cross? They didn't realize the terrible offense that they were committing. So how can you deal with an unforgiving spirit? There's an idea here of reconciliation and the replacement principle. The replacement principle simply means that we intentionally do good deeds toward those that have offended us. Intentionally be involved in acts of kindness to serve them, to love them in a Christian spirit, and have that hopefully replace our hard-hearted attitude toward them. There's a scripture that says if your brother offends you, you need to heap coals of fire on their head. And I have often thought in years past, particularly as a bald-headed man, that does not sound like a good idea to me. How do you heap coals of fire? How can that be an act of kindness? Is it a cleansing fire? Well, let me tell you the history behind it. Then it makes sense. In the early days, in the Roman days, biblical days, the custom was that at the end of the day, the slaves, the employees, the workers would be invited to come by the master's house, and a servant would place coals of fire in a pot. They would take it home on their head, and they would use it to light a fire. Okay? That's an act of kindness. It wasn't putting coals of fire to burn their bald scalp. It was putting coals of fire so they wouldn't have to work at kindling a fire. That was hard work in those days. So that's an act of kindness, and if we proceed in an act of kindness, then we will find that our feelings will follow in train. Now, any questions on this before we close this off? Yes. Go. Okay. We're sorry. We kept going.
Anyway, different personalities have different strengths in forgiveness.
Yes.
Melancholies can't forgive easily. I'm one who can forgive too easily. And September is too. She forgives too easily. She knows that. Anyway, I think we have to make the decision. It is a decision. And then we have to give our feelings to God.
That's true.
Only He can change those feelings, not even time.
Good point. All right, over here. We're going to get to the interesting subject of negotiating when we have a hard time resolving differences.
Is forgiveness being buddy?
Is forgiveness?
Being a buddy of them all afterwards?
Being a buddy. Oh, we're talking about...
I know I've had people that have stabbed me once or twice in the back, and I'm the kind of person that I'll just walk away and
I think of
not be with them anymore.
I think of an old saying, fool me once, shame on you. Fool me twice, shame on me. You remember that? So what is the relationship like after you have forgiven? We cannot pretend that the relationship will be the same. But it's a new relationship, a different relationship. If you forgive your spouse, you may even come into a deeper relationship in that kind of a situation. But most often, if we forgive somebody, we can love them as a Christian brother, but we have a new relationship. We don't have to keep regurgitating the same offense, but it's going to take a long time to restore the trust, if trust has been violated, etc. So, yes, we don't have to be buddy-buddy. You know, that may not happen, but that doesn't mean that we can't worship together and treat them with love and respect. All right, can we move on? September, you want to say one more thing?
I'll say it really quick. I had a stepmother that abused me the whole time that I was a kid. And then when I went to her house, abused me as I was an adult in front of someone else that she didn't know was watching. Well, she got arrested for it, and she blackballed me from the house because she thought that I had, and from the whole family because she thought that I had told on her, which I had not. And how I decided, because of God, to handle it is keep on calling her and be kind and be kind and be kind. Took me 19 years, but I finally, this Christmas, got a letter. She said I've got tears running down my face. I admit my dad's dead. I miss my dad, I miss you, and I feel so bad about all this time that we've missed.
Wow.
It took me 19 years, but I did remember throughout that 19 years, I know Laura and Larry and every other people, but I would say something about it, so I was still hurt, even though I was able to do that. So
thank you for that story. Praise the Lord.
Wow.
It takes time, and sometimes it takes much longer than we would want before relationships are restored. And again, they may never be the same relationship as you had before. It would be a different relationship. We're going to just gloss over this next section on forgiveness as symbolized by the Lord's Supper. I think you all recognize that. The fill in the blank there in the bottom of page 26 is our forgiveness by God is conditional upon our willingness to forgive others who have offended us. And it's something we need to seriously consider. If we are not willing to forgive somebody, we need to stop and think, would we indeed feel the need for God to forgive us? And that puts a whole new light on the situation. On page 27, we're going to talk about... we're going to be through in 30 minutes. Feel free to leave and take a break if you need to. Yes. For the sake of time, we'll keep going and you can catch up with us, but we'll be through within, let's say, 30, 35 minutes, unless you authorize us to go further. We'll see how we do.
See what you started in September?
Sometimes people think that mediation or negotiation within a Christian context is wrong because that means we give up our principles, we give up the things that we hold dear. We give in to somebody else, and the stronger personality is the one that is going to win. That's unfortunate that that concept prevails, but it's certainly there. Look at Philippians 2:4 at the top of page 27. Philippians says by Paul, each of you should look out not only for your own interest, but also for the interest of others. Thankfully, Paul did not say that we shouldn't have concerns about our interests, that we shouldn't protect those interests that are important to us. He simply says, don't just consider your own needs. You need to consider the other person's needs while you're engaged in working through an offense. The second bullet says the most effective way to negotiate substantive issues while persevering relationship is through cooperative negotiation. When you look out for the interest of others as well as your own interest. I lost my space on the line there a little bit. So, Eric, let's talk about getting ready to sit down and negotiate an issue. Say we are the third party, and we are trying to help our two sisters get through a problem, or our two brothers, or our two neighbors, or whatever. Get us into this topic about how we go about doing it.
You're going to want to pause. Pause. Think of the word pause. It's
Pause.
an acronym. You're going to want to prepare. When you're doing the work of helping two other people hear one another and come to an agreement, you need to not decide who's right, but you do need to understand why each person is at the place that they're at. That may be a very simple process of taking a few moments to... Anyway, I'm going to go into that. I'm getting ahead of myself. You need to affirm. So prepare, affirm, relationships. You need to understand interests. You need to search for creative solutions and evaluate options objectively and reasonably. So pause, prepare, affirm, understand, search, and evaluate. If you write those down, it'll help that stick in your head later. So what do we mean when we say prepare? Well, it means we're going to take some time to pray about it. You're entering into sacred work. You're treading into territory that is both ripe with the opportunity for glorifying God and also the playground of the devil. And so this is a spiritual activity that you're engaged in, and you need spiritual eyes and you need spiritual reinforcements to deal with what's going on. Get the facts, identify the issues and interests that are going on, understand and study what the Bible has to say about the situation, seek godly counsel, anticipate some of the reactions. I'll tell you what goes on in my head as I'm preparing. I'm thinking, okay, what are some of the likely concerns or questions that both of these parties are going to have? I'm processing, and it's not an answer. It's just helping me begin to think about some of the different things that could come up. Identify a good time and place. And as somebody who is helping in a negotiation, you have the opportunity to set the table and the context. So preparing in your mind, and maybe if you're the type that needs to have it written down, write a couple of notes to say, as we begin, I'd like to just say this. And that allows you to set the context. Oftentimes that context for me looks like, I want to remember with you what God has done for us. I want to just come back to the reality that no matter what real issues we're going to have to deal with, we are all children of the King. And He has bled and died and saved us from ourselves. So what we're going to do here should come in that context. Sometimes that helps remind people we're not here to win. We're here to glorify God. So a couple of those kinds of things. That's preparing. What about affirming relationships? Sometimes you can do the same thing, multiple things with one comment. If I'm affirming the fact that we're children of God, I'm affirming the fact we have a commonality in our relationship here. We are not living in totally different worlds. We are both coming together under this reality. Communicating in a courteous manner, spending time listening to personal matters and where things are at. If you are in a position to have some type of authority, remember that it is a very, very dangerous and powerful tool. Exercise it carefully. Submit to other authorities in a godly manner. Earnestly seeking to understand other people's concerns and perspective, looking out for the interest of others, confronting in a gracious manner. What does confronting in a gracious manner look like? I just want to pause there for a moment because that one's an interesting one. Give me an example, if you would. What would confronting in a gracious manner look like? We got someone down here. Where'd our microphone go? Wait a minute. He has not gotten his steps in yet today, but he's getting closer. What does confronting in a gracious manner look like?
I guess I'll use Larry. Hey, Larry, would it be all right if we could speak about something that I'm having maybe a little bit of a hard time with?
So she's actually asking permission if she can confront.
Asking permission. Now she also did something that's probably very natural for September. She made some physical contact, I noticed. I don't know if all of you saw that. She reached out. And now, you do need to know that some people will get a little surprised by that, but others will find that affirming.
And we won't tell the COVID police.
I'm not telling nobody. Another example, just real quick. What does confronting in a gracious manner look like?
Let's deal with one that I have to face quite regularly in my mediation work. How do you deal with somebody who you think is lying to you? Oh, that's a lie.
Well,
that would be the harsh way.
When we're talking in a negotiating situation, sometimes people are going to say things that certainly the other party isn't going to agree with.
Yeah.
And maybe you've even, as the negotiator, recognized that, you're not really on the same track here. There's some issues we got to talk about. Yeah.
Well, this one's got a little bit of a humor to it, but I had this dentist friend that I was going to. He was some type of from a different country. Great guy. But when I'd go to him, he'd always have such a bad breath.
Oh, dear.
And I said to him, how do you tell somebody that you really like something bad about them? He looked at me and says, you just tell them. And I says, you have bad breath.
Well, you were.
But you know what? He with all of his people after that, he sprayed his mouth before he worked on it.
Okay.
and you used a wise approach. You asked the question. Yeah. How do you approach somebody? And of course, you didn't tell him that it was you, that you wanted to talk to. Right.
Yeah.
Also, when you recognize somebody's lying to you, it's a flag that it's a weakness, and I don't know what to do about it a lot of times. I don't encourage it, but if I can talk about it, I will. If not, I'll wait till a later time.
One of the things that I have found works effectively is to say, I'm having a hard time accepting what you're saying. It doesn't harmonize with what I have learned or what I've known or whatever. Can you please explain? Because it doesn't ring true. Now, that's different than say, you're a liar.
It is confronted.
Yes, it's confronting. It's confronting with interest
But
in
it
a
is-
gracious manner.
It's when we approach it from a desire to say, help me understand what you're seeing, rather than saying, what I'm seeing is different and you're wrong. We're
Right.
affirming relationships.
Right.
So draw me into your reality. It doesn't mean you're going to agree with their reality, but at least you can understand, and then you have the dynamic to then be able to present alternatives to say, here's what I saw and here's what I know, and that how do we reconcile this difference? And sometimes you can then move forward with that. Go ahead.
Allow face saving is number 8 on that list, and I just want to make a comment. You are a very much a monolithic cultural ethnicity here in your church. But if you, in your family situation or in the community, are dealing with people of another ethnicity, need to be very wise and careful, because there are certain societies, certain ethnicities that must allow for face saving. They would not confront each other directly. It's ingrained in their system, in their lives. And for you to confront, as Jesus has taught us to do, would be very problematic. One of the most difficult things I do in my work is to dealing with people of a Korean nature, the Filipinos, those Orientals, because they have had this concept of you have to allow for face saving. You can never approach anything directly. And it's very difficult. You need to be careful in that regard.
Before the COVID, we had a lot of different, we had Oriental.
Okay.
They moved, and we have black, and we have...
Okay. So when you're dealing with another culture, think through very carefully. Not all cultures are impacted that way. Now we're going to talk about understanding interest, because it's key to resolving difficulties. I need some help up here, and I'm going to ask Brother Ken Crane to come up and help me out for a second. See, that's the disadvantage of knowing your name, Ken. You get selected. And you'll see in a little bit why I ask a good, strong man to help me out with this illustration. Ken, stand right here. Face me, if you would, please. Raise your hand. Let's stand sideways so they can see. Give me room to stand on to your left, or to your right, my left. Okay, raise your hand like you're going to swear to tell the total truth. Nothing. We're not going to do that, though. I'm going to push against your hand. All right. Are you ready? I'm going to push. All right. Set. Now, wait a minute, Ken. Who said anything about resisting? It's just a natural thing, right? They did exactly what I thought you would do. Thank you. You can go back and sit down. When we feel like we're being pushed, we will resist. It's natural. And it doesn't matter if it's physical, like I just pushed against Ken's hand. I thought for a minute he was just going to let me push his hand back and ruin my illustration. But when we are being pushed theologically, Adventists can really resist because we know what we believe, right? When we're being pushed emotionally, we're going to resist. So it is typical when we get into a conflict position and we realize that somebody else has taken a position different than ours, we're going to push against their position. We're going to show them how illogical it is. We're going to show them how expensive it is. We're going to show them how wrong it is. And when we do that, they just dig in and fight all the more. So what we need to do is to understand their interests. Let's look at these 3 points. In every disagreement, you'll find 3 different situations. You'll have an issue, which is an identifiable and concrete question. You'll have a position, which is the position or desired outcome that the parties want to have from their perspective. And then you'll have the interest, which motivates them in the position that they have taken. Okay? I'm going to use a real quick illustration from a church up in Canada that I worked with. They were building a new school, and it was almost finished. They were down to the finishing touches. The pastor had gone off to Camp Pitch for camp meeting, and the building committee was meeting to decide floor covering for their school. And they needed to do it because school was coming up around the corner. Well, the treasurer was a CPA. He had a client that was a businessman, and the client came to him and said, I know you folk are building a school. I know I have a sizable bill in your business. I tell you what, I would like to donate all the carpet that the school needs, and free of charge to the school. And you can give me credit and cancel my bill. Anyway, that was the offer, and it was all legal. Don't worry about him trying to do anything under the rug. I wouldn't want you to think that. So he comes to the building committee excited. We've got a floor covering free of charge. Until Mr. and Mrs. Church, and I'm saying that advisedly, the founders, the primary parties in the congregation, they didn't want carpet. They wanted tile. And they blew up into a real argument and a fight until finally the treasurer slammed his fist on the table and says, there's nothing wrong with this church that my Colt 45 and a couple of bullets wouldn't take care of.
I think we have a conflict.
It was glaring across at Mr. and Mrs. Church as he said it. That's when I got the call to come for help. And I knew as soon as I heard the story that it wasn't the carpet that was the issue. When, and you can write this down in your margin because it's not in the seminar guide. If I do a revision, I'll put it in. When the response is out of character with the offense, the perceived offense, it's not the real offense. You're not dealing with the real issue. You don't threaten the use of a gun at building committee time when you're talking about carpet and tile. It's just, you don't do that. So I knew there was another problem behind it. At any rate, let's talk for a little bit about how you would resolve that kind of a thing in the proper way at a building committee. And I'm going to divide the congregation down the aisle. You folks are in the committee and you want carpet. You folks are on the committee and you want tile. What we're going to do is to get to the interest. We know the positions, tile, carpet. Why do you want tile and carpet? So let's start off with the carpenters. Why would you want carpet in the school floor? Warmer. Quieter. It's free. Good. And you're on the wrong side. Any others? One? Last longer. That could be debated, but that's all right. Why do you folks want tile? Easier to clean. And? It's more sanitary, perhaps. And? Last longer? Pardon? Yeah, don't have to have a vacuum. Okay. Now you can see that some of the points could be argued one way or the other, but put up on the screen the next slide, Larry. And this is a simple tool that you can use when you get into a situation where you have a difference of opinion and you need to find a resolution. The issue is carpet or tile. The position is cleanliness, et cetera, et cetera. You can write them down on each side. And then you say, now, what do we have in common? How many of you are concerned about getting the best bang for your buck? Everybody. You can agree on that. How many of you want something that's sanitary? Everybody. How many of you are concerned about the ability to clean? Everybody on both sides. So you can draw these common points, and then you can say, now, all we have to do is to find a solution for the areas or the times when we disagree. So, do you people that want carpet really want carpet in the boys' bathroom? No. Do you want it in the utility or the recreation room where the Pathfinders are going to be doing arts and crafts? Probably not. Okay, so the obvious conclusion is you determine where each position will fit best, and the conclusion would be we'll carpet some areas, we'll put tile in other areas, right? That's what normally happens. And it's quite easy to work through, but if you get other things underground that are feeding the emotions, it becomes more difficult. Eric at Boise, Bob Kite, told me that I could make a living just teaching that one slide to Fortune 500 companies. It's just that basic.
It really is extraordinary how our emotions cloud the capacity to see fairly straightforward options. The third way, if you will, when we get into negotiated situations, the reason that people haven't gotten to this conclusion themselves is that there are emotional aspects that have stopped them from hearing one another. And so when you get to serve that group by or those two parties by helping their emotions communicate through their emotions, it's remarkable how, not always, there are intractable situations to be sure, but it is remarkable the number of times the answer was staring all of us in the face. Once we stopped long enough, or we had somebody help us say, oh, yeah, we could do that. I hadn't even thought of that. Well, why not? Because I had this voice screaming in my ear the whole time. If they get what they want, it's going to do bah, and so on.
We had that illustrated in A Different Day in the Life. At our first video this morning, they did this just through common courtesy with each other as spouses. You want to visit your dad. You need to see him. I want to go to the beach. They decided how they could bring their separate interests together and have an answer that works for everybody. We're going to take 5 minutes to go through dealing with unreasonable people, and that is
that's really all it's going to take to deal with unreasonable people.
I'm assuming there aren't any unreasonable people in the Goldendale Church.
Wow, that is awesome.
But just in case you might have an unreasonable person in your circle of contacts, we ought to look at it. And then if you'll be gracious with us, we can take a few minutes and give you the results of the surveys that we did Sabbath and talk a little bit about your homework assignments and what we're going to do with them. So let's bind it off by talking about dealing with unreasonable people. Romans 12, verse 21 says, do not be overcome by evil, but overcome evil with good. And the seminar reminds us here that we cannot fight the way other people fight. There are people, even in the church, that fight in unfortunate ways. They will threaten. They will accuse. They will malign your character in the church, at board meeting, on committee meetings, and business meetings. We can't respond in the same way if we're going to be following Christ's methods. So the first point is to control your tongue. Don't fight the way the other people do. Oh, we could use illustrations from our current political scene of this on ad infinitum. I accuse our current president of taking politics into a downhill spiral such as no other president has ever done because of his tongue. And other people are responding in kind. And we have reached new depths of political talk. Anyway, enough said. Number 2, seek godly advisors. You may be new to an environment such as a new pastor, somebody coming into a church. You got a difficult person to deal with. Talk to the people that have been around a while and see how do you deal with that person. At a church we were involved with in British Columbia as members, there was a person by the name of, she had a nickname, EGR. That was a nickname that the pastor had and some of the church leaders, and I learned later about it. I didn't get there as often because of my travels, but my wife did, and I learned that EGR stood for Extra Grace Required. Her name was Diane, and it took extra grace to deal with her. I felt sorry for the pastor at times. But they learned how you have to deal with Diane. You cannot deal. See, people get unreasonable for different situations, different reasons. Some are unreasonable because they don't have the same information you do. Some are unreasonable because they have physical or mental disabilities, and they're not able to cope as you are, with that you don't have those same disabilities. So you have to seek out sometimes how you deal with that particular kind of person. Brother Dale?
Yeah, I'm just curious if you could just take a second and help explain the difference between seeking godly advisors and gossip.
Excellent question.
Well, I don't know that I've been asked that question before, Dale. Thank you for coming up with a new one. How do you tell the difference between gossip and, okay, I would categorize it in the category of getting counsel from a professional. Go to your pastor and you're seeking counsel. How can I deal with Paul? He just seems so unreasonable. And can you give me any advice on how I can deal with him? You know, tattling on what Paul has been doing or saying, you're saying, how can I relate to him? Does that help? It's kind of fits in the category of seeking counsel. You know,
I could add to that a little bit, Dale, that gossip and counsel sometimes are finely divided by the intent of my heart. And I have been guilty of calling up people I seek counsel from, and discovered as I was talking I was really actually gossiping.
It would be easy to drift into it.
I was looking for sympathy for my position rather than counsel on how to deal with the problem. So, it's partly who we're choosing to talk to and partly why we're choosing to talk to them, because you can talk to the right person for the wrong reasons.
So can you give me an example of some good advisors to go to? In other words, if I'm looking for sympathy, I'll go to anybody I think will take my side, right?
And we know where to find sympathy, don't we?
So to look for a godly advisor, we're looking for someone who's not necessarily concerned with giving you sympathy, but truly giving you godly advice on not just to take your side, but how to resolve the issue in a godly way, right?
That's right.
Correct.
And you're looking for a neutral party, typically. Somebody that will not take a side. You may even need to take to somebody completely outside the sphere of the circumstance. At times you may need to do that.
When it comes to godly advice, I have intentionally, over the years, built relationships with, I've got 2 people in my life that I have developed over time the confidence that they will tell me hard truths about myself. That's intentional on my part. They happen to be friends, and they're good people, but we have also built over time a relationship where there's a level of accountability that I've given them permission to tell me the hard thing. And I have to intentionally keep those channels open. And I sometimes affirm that when I'm talking to them to say, I need you to tell me the truth here. Not because they won't, but because I want to reaffirm I am open to that and you're not going to offend me by telling me I'm wrong or that I'm handling this poorly.
Okay.
So,
good point. The third point here, sometimes we get into situations, particularly in organizations, where people will want to go back and revisit the same decision over and over again. And if we do that, we're going to have problems. We need to keep doing what's right, is the next point in the filling in the blanks. We need to study the issue, get all the light that we can, and only when there is more information that has come should we be revisiting the decision. I'll give you a little insight by telling you that you're going to see in a moment based on your survey that your church has struggled with that particular thing. That when difficult decisions are made, there tends to be disunity rather than accepting the decision that the leaders have made. And I want to say quite bluntly that if we have done our homework as leaders, and if we have done the study right, there's no new information, we have prayerfully made a decision, we need to stay by the decision. If we listen to naysayers that saying they just want to be discussed again so maybe they can get their way, you are going to be as busy as a stray dog at a Whistler's convention.
He was really hoping to be able to use that one.
Yeah, I waited to get a chance to say that. But you get the point. There comes a time when a decision has to stay. And unless there's new information, then we're not right as leaders to just constantly go back and regurgitate and revisit a situation just so somebody might get their way ultimately. The last point on page 29 is to recognize your limits. Paul's statement in Romans 12, if it is possible as far as it depends on you. I think there are times in our lives when we have to recognize that we are not the person to deal with that other person because of differences in background, personalities, whatever. We may need to step aside and let someone else deal with that person or that situation because we all are limited in our abilities to expand and to reach out and accept. There are some people in my work throughout the years that I just found it extremely difficult to work with, and I would back off and allow somebody else to deal with issues when it involved that party. Page 30, our last page. This we can all depend on. The ultimate weapon is deliberate, focused love. Deliberate, focused love. Pastoring the Spokane Central Church for 4 years, I had one member that, well, the Canadians would call him the loyal opposition. And he just loved to take the opposite side of whatever the pastor wanted to do. for 4 years. I wanted him on the church board, and I had him on the church board for 4 years because I wanted to hear it at the board, and instead of having it go throughout the congregation, I wanted to hear him there when we were considering what to do. 4 years after we began our work, we were called to Milton Freewater Church, and they had the typical farewell for the Brown family. You remember that one, Eric?
I do.
In Spokane. And they had the typical opportunity for people to share the nice things they wanted to say. And this brother asked for the microphone. And I thought, what is he going to say? He has fought me tooth and nail all the way through. You know, it wasn't as bad as it sounds probably, but it wasn't pleasant either. And he said, most of you folks know that I haven't always agreed with Pastor Brown. And I thought, well, that's an understatement. But, he said, and boy, then my ears went up. But he said, I have never questioned the fact that Pastor Brown loved me. You can tell I get choked up just talking about it. You know, here we had been in opposition to each other. But somehow through that I had been able to show to him, I love you, brother. Even if I don't agree with you, I love you. And that won the day. Okay? He never questioned the fact that I loved him. So whatever we do, we need to do it in such a way that the other person knows that in spite of our differences, we love them. Notice the text. If your enemy is hungry, feed him. If he's thirsty, give him something to drink. In doing this, you will heap the burning coals of fire on his head. Do not be overcome by evil, but overcome evil with good. So here's our last fill in the blanks. Doing good can protect your own bitterness and resentment. We cannot repeatedly do acts of kindness without having them deal with our hard heart. It will soften our heart, and it may even bring the other party to repentance if we will consistently love them and bring them and do acts of kindness toward them. End of seminar. Whew. We made it. So many times I don't get to the very end, but I want to thank you all for your comments. You want to keep doing this. Any closing comments or questions before we talk about the results of your survey and where we go from here? Yes, brother.
Yeah, I wanted to say something about your illustration about the guy with the helicopter and the motorcycle park. The one thing that we do, and we do this in the church too, we crucify people on hearsay information.
Oh, yes.
Right. Yeah, and that was one of the issues those people did.
Okay. I have one, pardon me, I have one final video clip we want to show you. So any other comments? This one takes a little preliminary comment. Dale, you want to say something? Okay. This video clip is a parody on the 12-step program. It's a monologue by Charlie Green, the author of these video clips. Oh, and by the way, I have got to tell you this. Charlie and Ruth Green have a ministry called Peculiar People. They travel the country teaching churches how to use drama to accomplish the gospel purposes. They're neat people. They have a good sense of humor. And they were at our convention after they produced these video clips for us to use. And we had a good time getting acquainted with them. And they had a booth out in the foyer of the convention center. And they had T-shirts and baseball caps and various things advertising their ministry of Peculiar People. One of the things they had were coffee cups that poked fun at the various denominations. And I was standing there looking at them when I heard somebody ask a question. One cup said, Gourmet Baptist Coffee. And you turn it around and it showed a hand dunking a donut. Perfect for dunking. Baptist dunking. And then another one said Gourmet Presbyterian Coffee. You turn it around, brewed decently and in order. Famous line for Presbyterians. And I don't remember some of the others, but I tell you, I kid you not, while I was standing there, I heard somebody say, Charlie, do you have one for Adventist? And he wasn't talking to me. He was talking about Charlie Green. Do you have a coffee cup for Adventist? He says, I don't, but I know what I would put on it. Gourmet Adventist Coffee. Turn it around, but we're pretending it's cocoa. He has a good sense of humor. Anyway, in this clip, he's acting like he was at a 12-step program, and he's got to give up this habit, a habit of peacemaking. So it's tongue-in-cheek. Enjoy the humor.
Hi, my name is Ted.
Hi, Ted.
Hi,
Yo, Ted.
Yeah, well, this is my first time here.
It's okay, Ted.
No shame, brother.
Just be honest, Ted.
Thanks. So anyway, like I said, my name is Ted, and I'm a peacemaker. I started peacemaking about 5 years ago, you know. Oh, at first it was just a couple times, you know, nothing big, just a little encouragement to a coworker, or maybe a confrontation with a family member. Nothing major.
That's all right, Ted. We're all with you.
Thanks. Anyway, I guess I should start where it all began. Like I said, it was about 6 years ago. Everything was normal. And then one day I was reading my Bible, you know, part of my quiet time. I mean, I had a quiet time every day, 10 minutes of Bible reading, 5 minutes of prayer. It made me feel better. I had no idea it would eventually lead to this, where I am today.
Oh, we've all been there, Ted. Keep going. You're doing great.
Yeah, thanks. Anyway, I had this Bible with all the cross references, you know, verses that would lead you to other verses about the same subject, and turn back to Matthew 5:24, you know. Not that verse. The part about being reconciled to your brother, and then Galatians 6, bear one another's burdens, and then on to 1 John. And hey, let me tell you something. If you're out there tonight and you don't want to end up like me, stay away from 1 John. I mean, that's the real stuff. That's not diluted, you know. 1 John said, if anyone hates his brother, he walks in darkness. And then it hit me. Oh, sure, there was lots of times it didn't show, but I knew it was in my heart. Times that I didn't forgive, that I held a grudge rather than doing what Jesus said.
Yo, been there, done that, Ted. Let it all out, babe.
Yeah, well, like I said earlier, start out slow, you know. I just figured a little apology now and then wouldn't hurt. So that morning after my quiet time, I saw my wife, and I apologized for raising my voice the night before. And then I saw my daughter getting ready for school, and I asked her forgiveness for not being more involved in her life. Oh, man, what a rush. I couldn't believe it. I never felt anything like it before.
Yeah.
So anyway, the next day, the good vibe starts wearing off.
Yeah, you knew it. You knew it.
I mean, I was at work. I couldn't run home and go and do a reconciliation or an apology there, huh?
Yeah.
So what did I do? Well, that's when I started my exhibitionism. Yeah. Yeah, I started doing it in public. Oh, it was all innocent enough. I went up to Mike and I told him the more I thought about our argument, the more I realized that I was wrong. Oh, it happened again. Woo! That rush of freedom. Well, before long, I was actually planning and scheduling conversations with people, and that I knew I'd offended. But not even that was enough after a while.
Yeah.
I started talking to people I knew I hadn't offended, but I could tell they were upset with me for some reason. Yeah. Oh, and the rush and the adrenaline just increased with every step. It was unbelievable. And then one day I hear about this guy in our church is leaving his wife. I mean, what does that have to do with me, right? I mean, that was this guy's life. That was his mess. He hadn't offended me. I hadn't offended him. There was nothing I should do about it. I went to talk with this guy. Oh, we talked. We talked, we cried, we yelled. We met several times, and finally, before long, he started doing it too. Yeah. Yeah, you know, getting his kicks from reconciliation. I knew then I needed help, and that's why I came to Peacemakers Anonymous.
We're glad you did, Ted. We're here to help you.
Well, yeah, thanks. So I guess what I'm saying is I want to be cured, you know. I want my old life back. I want to live like a zombie again. Yeah. I want my relationships on a surface level, no deep emotions. I want to stop being moved with compassion and understanding every other hour. Yeah. I want to stop crying and feeling sympathy for other people.
Oh, you know it.
I got to stop this. Just give me my job, my family, my middle-class lifestyle, 2.5 kids, a minivan, a dog, a garage, and 2 cars.
Oh.
I'm tired of this face stuff. It makes me feel so dependent. So much like I got to act on what I believe. So anyway, I guess that's why I'm here. With your help, maybe I can go through the 12 steps.
You know it.
Get back to normal Christianity again.
We'll help you. All right, Ted. Do it.
Oh, dear.